Hello, and welcome to Unsheathed with your hosts, Kyle Gold and Cam Hirosaki. We hope that you enjoy the program. Please stick around afterwards. There'll be cake and blowjobs.
Hi, welcome to Unsheathed episode 17. I'm Kyle Gold.
I am Cam Hirosaki.
And I'm very pleased that we've made it all the way to 17. 17 is one of my favorite numbers, going back to my early days reading the Phantom Tollbooth, when the humbug, if you remember him, would automatically, when posed any problem, just shout the number 17. And that was his answer.
I haven't read that book since elementary school.
I always love 17. Whenever anyone asks me something now, I always just say 17 if I don't know the answer. And sometimes if I do.
My number is 87. Whenever I need a random number to pick up, it's always 87.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's Reggie Wayne's number.
I was just gonna say it has nothing to do with football. And you went right there.
Well, it's Sunday night. We've been kind of immersed in football for about 10 hours.
It was a bad football week for me this week.
It has, the season has been very interesting so far.
It really has. Yeah.
But, at any rate, we're here to answer your questions. We're going to talk a little bit about the holidays coming up.
Yep. Because
it is middle of November. And we're going to give you an update on our NaNoWriMo listeners. And, I don't know, we'll talk about whatever else we think of to talk about in the next half hour.
Based on what I know that some of the questions are asking, I think I have a few good jumping off points that I have in mind, but I'll save those.
Oh, we should talk a little bit about Midwest Fur Fest, too, because
yes,
we will be doing some stuff there. So if anyone's listening and is going to be there, we will let you know where to go. Stay tuned.
That's true.
So our first question is about science fiction. We had done our horror show and had talked about devoting some shows to other genres, and somebody wrote in with science fiction question, but we didn't get any more. So instead of waiting, we're going to just go ahead and talk about it now. This is Dear Kyle Gold and K.M. Hirosaki. I had a few questions on writing science fiction that I thought might be interesting for you to consider. First is a question on dialogue, or perhaps underlying culture. Say a furry comes across another group of furries and humans who shoot at him. Would it be too jarring for him to shout, "Don't shoot, I'm human"? Or is it necessary for him to shout an alternate like, "Don't shoot, I'm Terran"? Is there a perfect way for a furry to identify himself? Or is it completely determined by the underlying culture in the story? As a second question, when writing a science fiction story, is it important to explain the hows and whys of technology, or is that something you can simply gloss over? I realize that it is important to maintain internal consistency within the story. What I'm not sure of is the requirement for explanation. Is it enough to talk about what something does, or is the average reader going to want at least a minor explanation? I thank you both for your time and help. Sincerely, Jarolon, occasional writer, Fox.
You're never going to let that go, man.
All I'm saying is that's how old this message is.
Speaking of science fiction-y topics, like mad scientist sticking your transformative something or other.
Right.
Speaking of explaining how things work.
I mean, I was a science fiction fan before I was a furry fan, so...
Yeah, me too.
Thought about this a lot. And in terms of the first question, how would a furry identify himself to another group of furries or humans? I would think it would depend more on the culture.
Yeah, based on what he says, I mean, it's a matter of making sure that it depends on what the self-identifying, thing is going to be when it comes to like in-group and out-group.
I guess what he's posing is, there's furries that are part of the human society, but then there's also furries that are part of an alien society. And so what he's trying to say is, how would a furry identify himself as being part of one or the other? And just because if he's in a suit and they can't recognize him, like in that case, a human which in a science fiction novel would shout, "Hey, don't shoot, I'm human." Right. So it's just whatever.
Are both humans and furries from Earth in this case?
It would be just, I think, wherever they come from.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you take the case of a war,
Right.
if an American soldier's in Iraq and is separated from his unit, and he sees some of his soldiers, as he's approaching them, he doesn't say, "Don't shoot, I'm human."
Yeah.
He says, "Don't shoot, I'm American."
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if I were to go on a vacation to Europe, I would tell people I was American. Whereas, if I was in, outer space on a different planet, I would tell people I'm from Earth, as opposed to I'm from America. I'm not quite so jingoistic as to represent myself to an alien species as being American.
And it is.
I bet that makes Glenn Beck cry.
It is now okay to be American in Europe again. You don't have to tell people you're Canadian.
Thank you for the year of global PR, Mr. Obama.
So for the second question, this is a whole big thing with science fiction. And I was talking to a friend recently. Was this you who was saying you get one gimme? No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't me.
It was foosball, actually.
Oh, okay.
But he said you get one gimme in science fiction. So, in most science fiction, there's a premise. The premise of the book is, how would society be different if technology had advanced to a certain point, or if a certain discovery had been made, if we were able to go faster than light, or if we were able to teleport, the Larry Niven flash crowd,
Right.
or if, to stick with Niven, if the sun went nova, but it was nighttime where you were, what you would see was the moon getting super bright, but you wouldn't know, you wouldn't experience it right away because you wouldn't feel the force of it until later. So how would people react to that? So generally you get one piece of technology that you can gloss over. You don't have to explain how it works. You just say, humanity invented a faster-than-light drive by the, stick Einstein or Newton or someone in there and add a made-up name like the Kurtzman-Einstein principle allowed people to generate starship drives that broke the faster-than-light barrier by, I don't know, something, the matter-energy distinctions, and, the ship became pure energy for the duration of the voyage, and people are just like, well, what the hell? And you're like, yeah, it's science fiction. Doesn't matter how that works. What matters is the effect that it had. That said, a lot of science fiction is written specifically with the audience of people in mind that want to hear more about science.
Right.
And the one book I've read of Neil Stephenson was Snow Crash, was very much in that vein, where he wanted to explain all of his pseudoscience and go into great detail. And there's a certain group of people that really like that.
I think I'm going to disagree with the notion that you get one piece of technology that you don't have to explain and then the rest you do. I think that depends more on if you're writing hard sci-fi or not so hard sci-fi. I mean, even if you look at something, like Battlestar Galactica, which is definitely science fiction, but they never actually go into a description on how anything actually works. It's just endemic to the setting. And
no, but the gimme in Battlestar Galactica is, there's this civilization. That's your thing. You don't have to explain. You don't have to explain where did they come from. And the technology is all sort of just like, there's a civilization and this is how they live. So it doesn't have to be a piece of technology.
I guess I was misinterpreting the scope of the gimme here.
Well, and for a lot of furry fiction, you can consider it science fiction and just say furries are the gimme. You don't have to explain how they came about. The question is, how is society different with these?
I wish more stories adhered to that.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Wasn't that like our pet peeve number 3 or 4?
It was one of them. It was certainly on the list.
Right.
But no, I think that the detail, he says, like, how much detail should you go into? I think that if the workings of the technology are important to the story, or if it matters for, some sort of plot point later, like if there's some sort of mystery element where solving the mystery relies on, the inner workings of it, then yes, you should probably see that earlier in the story. But, if somebody's using their, food replicator or something, I don't think you need a 2-page description on how this thing takes matter and produces food. All you need to know is that, it takes stuff and makes food for you. Done. Like, end of. You don't need to go into
Yeah, and that's sort of the same rule that applies to any piece of writing, which is you include the details that are necessary to the story.
Yeah.
And in science fiction, mostly what people are doing is saying, if we were able to produce this one piece of technology, if we were in this one situation where we encountered an alien race that was all made up of big bugs that hated us, if we found this artifact that allowed us to travel instantly to mysterious destinations.
If aliens visited Earth and they looked like the devil.
If a scientist invented a machine that allowed him to see people's lifelines, what effect would that discovery have, or what problems would it raise, or what problems would it solve? They would be the problem solvers.
You beat me to it. I hate you again.
So there you go. That's, I think, in a nutshell, add the detail that's essential to the story. And, we've talked about fantasy a little bit. We should maybe do a whole show on fantasy about world building and stuff like that. I will add that one caveat that there's a lot of fiction out there aimed at people who like to read the technology, who like to read science, who like to read that kind of technological world building.
David Weber in the Honor Harrington books, they spend a lot of time going into the how and the why of all of the technology, but it's also military fiction. And so the setup for, the naval engagements that take place your understanding of that depends on understanding the technology behind it.
Well, and I was going to say like a science fiction version of Tom Clancy.
Yeah, there you go. Where he's just pretty much like technology porn in a sense.
Yes.
There's gun porn and
it's the worst kind of porn. Want to go on our next one?
Yes. So our second question here for the week, this comes from Earth Digger, a recent listener to our podcast. He says,
It was recent at the time of the message. It's a little old now.
It's a couple weeks old. But he says, I started listening after Rainforest and was actually one of the people in the audience. I'm the guy who asked about using technical terms. And yes, I remember you. I'd like to start by saying that I love the podcast. Thank you very much. I started listening expecting a podcast full of dirty jokes that I might be able to learn something about writing from, and instead was pleasantly surprised to find that the writing tips cover the majority of the show. Now I have both a comment and a question. On the topic of is furry a fetish, which for the readers who might not, or listeners who might not be familiar with that, we covered that a few weeks ago when we had Flane on the show.
Flane has left the Bay Area, which makes us a little bit sad.
Yes, he's no longer a unwilling prisoner in our mountain bunker, oil tanker, wherever we are.
I don't think he was that unwilling. It just took him a few minutes to get used to wine instead of beer.
We had beer that night, too.
Oh, we did have beer.
We were goofy enough. So, anyway. So, on the topic of is furry a fetish, I have to say I do not believe it to be the case. I believe it to be an obsession. A fetish implies that it's purely a sexual desire that most furries have, but I've instead found the case to be that most furries just like everything better when it's furry. So, of course, porn is one such thing improved. It's my belief that quite a lot of furries, if not most furries, are turned on equally by humans as they are furry characters. It's just that the non-humans are more interesting and aesthetically pleasing. So actually, he gets into a question here, but I want to address this first because I think it's its own conversation and I don't want to lose it. Mm-hmm. I think I will agree that I have a degree of obsession with furry and furry characters, although I'm going to disagree that I'm equally turned on by humans as I am by furry characters.
I'm going to disagree on that point as well. And I think I actually made the comment during the podcast with Flane that I actually don't believe that I have any porn of humans on my computer or anywhere that I keep it.
Yeah, if I have it, it's minimal, and I certainly don't ever bring it up to look at.
Well, I should say the only place where it would be is in my browser cache from websites I don't intend to go to that have ads.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But
and then it's all girls.
Yeah. What's up with that?
Which I'm also not turned on by, for the most part.
Battlestar
Galactica being a big exception.
We fear boobies.
Fear taboobies, yes.
But, yeah, and I would agree that it's an obsession with some people, but I would question that the conclusion that he draws that it's then not a fetish.
Yeah.
Because I would say it could be a fetish that's just being rechanneled into other areas because it's not possible to walk around in polite society with, pictures of big wolves with erections all over the place.
That's true. I think that we also sort of skirt close to the debate of, is furry a genre or is furry a meta-genre? And I think that can apply to, is furry a fetish or is furry a meta-fetish? Because you can certainly take people who are into furries, but then you have people who are into, like, baby fur or, like, furry
Furries
bondage.
plus.
Yeah, furries plus vor, furries plus mpreg, that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of these fetishes are combinable. I mean, you can be into bondage and dom sub play. You could be into bondage and not be into dom sub play.
That's true.
You could be into bondage and food. Although that's bringing up some unpleasant images, so let's move right along there.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I've never been too much into bondage just because I think I'm more fun if I can move around.
Well, otters are notoriously difficult to pin down anyway, so slippery and all.
We get a +4 species bonus to escape artist checks.
And breaking kit.
My urinary knows no bounds.
And I also think that they can perform certain actions without external lube.
That's also probably very true. We might
You're
get to
sounding more and more otterish as we're...
I just wrote a otter sex scene in a story that's over 3,000 words long. I've had otters on the brain for a long time. I've been thinking about, quite literally, the ins and outs of otters very much.
And then
and that segues greatly into her sticker's question.
And then we just read a whole story about an otter getting inned and outed.
Yes. Well, he certainly got inned.
Yeah. All right, go on to the rest of the question.
But yes, oddly enough, that's in contrast to my question. The topic of getting anatomy right amongst various species was brought up at the Rainforest panel, and I have to wonder, what is a good way to get information on animal anatomy, besides, of course, the obvious methods that are likely to get me mauled, put in prison, and or banned from the zoo for life? So I do want to say, which I believe I also...
love his choices.
I know. Well, if that's the wheel you're spinning, then I think you need to find a different wheel. I know I mentioned this at the Rainforest panel, but just to go on record, I really think that if you're writing furry fiction and or drawing furry art, there is no right, quote unquote, and I made air quotes right there, when it comes to anatomy. If you don't want your characters to have, animal genitalia, they don't have to. There's no furry erotica police that are going to throw you in furry porn jail if your characters don't have, sheaths and knots.
I should say there are furry erotica police, but they don't really have any authority over you.
That's true.
I've had people come up to me and say, "Wow, your characters don't have fully animal genitalia," and made that remark, and I'm like, "Yeah, they don't." And that was that.
It's like, you know what? They don't have fully animal anatomy in any other respect either. They have opposable thumbs and can speak language and wear clothes,
right?
Which animals don't do.
Which is amusing and kind of goes back to the whole concept of you get one gimme.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of people will accept the fact that you can have a furry species evolve to humanoid, walk and talk like humans, and suck dick like humans, and whatever else, even though they have teeth, 44 pointy teeth. Humans have 32 fairly pointy teeth also, so it's not that big a stretch. But parenthetically, that was from a website where people were like, "Have you seen a fox's mouth and all those teeth in there? Why would you ever put anything in that mouth?" And I thought, have you seen a human's mouth? I mean, we have lots of teeth too, and foxes can open their jaws pretty wide.
Yeah, and
not as wide as thylacines, I'm told.
Yeah, as I've seen in pictures. Also, a human bite can do a lot of damage. Have you seen pictures of people who have been bitten by other people, like the marks and the gashes you can leave?
I actually intentionally make an effort to avoid such pictures.
Yeah.
But that does segue into my answer to his question, which is the internet is your friend.
It's also your enemy, but it is your friend.
Now, if you cannot find pictures of the specific animal genitals you're looking for on the internet, then you need to go to Let Me Google That for you, because they're out there.
Yeah, and you know what? You can even find it in a not... I think he's... Wow. That was a great word to stumble on, wasn't it?
You can find it around a knot.
You can. So, there are... If you're worried about scouring the net for getting in trouble for, like, coming across, like, bestiality-related web pages or something, which I think is a legitimate concern, I know for a fact that there are, like, veterinary websites that cover this sort of thing.
Yeah, and Wikipedia, and there's academic institutions that have pictures of whatever or have descriptions. And, I mean, really, if you want to, you can also go to some of the more zoophile-oriented toy manufacturers, and they take great pride in getting their toys pretty true to life.
Yeah,
so,
if you look at if you go to the places that make furry sex toys, those are pretty anatomically true to real animals.
And you can check with folks over at Notcast for some specific recommendations for toy manufacturers, because I believe they have done extensive research into them.
They've really plunged into those depths, as it were. Plus, you can also look at... There's a lot of artists that produce fandom artwork that certainly do this sort of thing as well. Granted, if you're not familiar with the base animal genital look, you might not be able to tell just from looking how half-human hybrid is this or not.
Well, but it's worth posting on FA to the artist and saying, where do you get your references?
That's true.
There's a whole community of people out there that are interested in what animal genitals look like, and they will be happy to tell you probably more than you want to know.
This is when I'm almost glad we don't have an Unsheathed forum, because I'd be afraid of how people would post, if you want to see dog dick, here's where you go. Bam! And then just proverbially slap it right out there.
Yes.
But now I'm just remembering this one conversation I had on Furry Muck years ago, and then somebody just chimed in and just said, I'm amazed at how furries will go to such extreme efforts to anthropomorphize everything about their character except for their penis. And when you think about it that way, it is kind of silly. But
yeah, and that's why I don't remember if I finished my thought, but the whole fact that you get this gimme in the story where, we've accepted that this animal's evolved to this stage, but we can't accept that their genitals look even the tiniest bit different from the animals that we're accustomed to seeing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny how people separate that.
Which I think this falls under his previous comment about this being an obsession, and I think that some people are obsessively motivated. Yes,
but the fact that it is the sexual component that people particularly obsess over makes me kind of go back to it being a fetish.
That's true. And honestly, I think that... go on.
I was going to conclude and move on, but finish up.
No, I was going to say, I think
bring us home.
I think that there's a definite focus on quote-unquote anatomical correctness when it comes specifically to canid genitalia. I think people are far less sticklers when it comes to felines and...
The people that are fans of those animals, though, they are sticklers.
Yeah, but I think that fandom on the whole, people are like, I'm okay with knots and sheaths, but not with barbs, because that wouldn't be cool.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I would... Alright, hypothetical situation, if there were in fact an anthropomorphic canine creature that had a knotted penis, I would be okay with that more than I would be with something that had barbs.
Well, you realize that the barbs aren't actually pointed pieces of metal that dig into your flesh, right?
No, I know.
Okay. Just checking.
I went to school for biology, too.
No, so my question to you was, is it possible to make quote-unquote air quotes?
Yeah, go for it.
That's all, because you were making air quotes and saying quote-unquote, and I thought, are you making quote-unquote air quotes?
I think I was making the verbal experience to sort of augment the physical gestures I was making that the users don't get to see.
but which they will get to see, hopefully live. We have 2 conventions coming up. I'm still waiting to hear from Further Confusion. We're hoping that we'll be able to do a live show there. Furry Fiesta has already agreed to let us do a live show there.
Yeah, I need to figure out if I can make it to Furry Fiesta, actually.
If not, we'll have to Skype you in, and that would be pretty sad.
I will be putting every effort into going.
All right.
Even if I have to fly in on Friday night.
But more about that as the things come up. And but while we're on the subject of conventions, we will be leaving for Midwest Fur Fest later this week, probably right around the time this gets posted.
It could not come too soon.
And we will be doing a couple of events there. I think actually I've confirmed I will be doing the reading at the Sofa Wolf preview on Friday afternoon at 3. And I've talked to Sofa Wolf about doing a sign-in at their table immediately following that to kind of, anyone who comes to the preview just kind of, follow us back to the dealer's room and we'll sit down and sign some books. Also, at the preview reading, we're hoping to give away a special mystery prize that we'll be bringing to the convention.
I know what it is.
And I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it, but the more you know about Yolande's journal on yolande.livejournal.com and the upcoming book Shadow of the Father, the better your chances are of getting it, I would say.
Yeah, and I don't think I have any official signings pegged for anything, but if you run into me at the con and you have something that I've written that you want me to sign, I'll certainly sign it for you.
I know they'll be selling copies of X there, so we might send some people your way to track you down for that.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good point. I am finally Twittered.
Uh-huh.
I have been in Twitter dated. I'll probably be sending out Twitter updates while I'm at the convention if there's any place that I'll be where people will be free to come and mingle. Just Cam Hirosaki, all one username, no funny dashes or anything on
punctuation. I'm also on Twitter, and I'll be posting some stuff to that. We're going to try to do an Unsheathed, but it will be in a unofficial area. Right now, we are thinking we're not going to be able to have a sort of unlimited audience for it, so it may just be up in a hotel room somewhere. Sorry about that, but hopefully at some point in the future we'll be able to do something bigger, at least.
Maybe somebody can pull the fire alarm again and we can do it outside in the freezing cold wheeling air.
I was just thinking we could do it outside, but hopefully, maybe it'll be warm.
That would, looking at the weather for the coming week, it doesn't look like it's going to be.
All right.
It looks like it's going to be getting colder.
Well, keep an eye on our Twitter accounts. I'm Kyle Gold, all one word, and we will definitely post if anything changes about that. We'll try to give you, at least an hour's notice. We have a quick NaNoWriMo, actually 2 NaNoWriMo updates. This one is from Condrell. He says, if there's going to be some public name and shame for the month's event, I might as well make it official to keep me honest and pen a-wiggling. I'm working on a project that's got a working name of Eon Machine. I've given it a bit of skeletal structure before NaNoWriMo started so I can keep my thoughts organized. So far I'm about 2,000 words in, and with the free time I'll have this week, I plan to pick up the pace so I can meet the demands of the month. This was November 3rd, so he's hopefully a little further in by now. So he's talking... He actually has a question as well, and we may... I'm going to read it, but we may want to come back to it because I think we're going to run a little over our time.
Okay.
He says, I hear often about characters or plot points developing organically, and I just can't seem to wrap my head around quite what you mean. Like one of the people you'd mentioned, I dream and think and envision the story in my head for ages before pen meets the proverbial paper. For someone like me, how can you describe characters writing themselves out of your control? Furthermore, is there some way you'd suggest letting go of a story of mine so I can try to let it write itself? even if the results are atrocious, and since it's something I've never tried, I imagine it might be, it's something I'd like to try.
I guess the thing is where he's talking about, oh, you already know what you want the character to do. Most of the time, when you get to that point of the story, that is what they end up doing. It's just, I think every so often, you get there and you're looking at the scene and you go, now that I know what's come between, point A and point, F, now that I'm at point G, I don't think that's what they do.
Yeah, I think my short answer, and I do believe we'll pick this up again in a future episode, but my short answer is, I don't think you need to worry so much about it. I think that you're going through that process in your head.
Yeah.
And the way that you write is not conducive to that happening.
Yeah.
I think when that happens, it's people that have not figured out everything completely, but they're going, and this is what I do a lot of the time, is I figure it out up to a certain point, and then as I'm writing it, the way I'm imagining the characters behaving tells me what to write next.
Yeah.
And you're doing that all in your head before you get anything down on the computer at all. So I wouldn't stress about it.
Yeah, when it comes to short stories, I almost never know how they're going to end when I start them.
I mean, if you want to try it, then I would say give yourself a situation and just sit down and start writing.
Yeah,
and
ask
see what
yourself,
comes out.
what if?
Don't sit there for months planning it in your head.
Yeah.
We have one more NaNoWriMo note, and this is from Kite Phoenix. It was actually from Kite Phoenix about 2 weeks ago, so apologize for the lateness, but I think he got it in right after we recorded the 2 weeks ago show. And he says, so I have put this on my FA and LJ, but I figure if you guys throw this out there, the response might get rather interesting. His FA, by the way, is KYTEPHEONIX. He says, I'm attempting this whole 50,000 word thing, but for some reason I decided to make my life more difficult, so I invite the both of you to throw something into the ring, so to speak. And he does say so to speak, so that is in...
As it were.
As it were.
Air quotes.
Basically, I have my idea for my novel, but I want to make it more difficult, so I'm asking you and your listeners to either drop a character into my novel, or an idea, or an item. Anything that really strikes your fancy. No matter what it is, I will manage to work it into my project somehow in a hopefully non-corny fashion. For all those fellow authors out there insane enough to try this, good luck. Kite Phoenix. So...
You want to make your writing more difficult on purpose? Wow, you are a masochist.
Uh-huh. So Hirosaki-san and I are going to give you a character and an item. If anyone else wants to chime in, again, send them a private message on FA at KYTEPHEONIX.
So yeah, the character idea I came up with, I was just sort of going through things in my heads, and I came up with sort of the mental image of this, Fennec Fox airplane mechanic.
I like that one.
Yeah, I was going to think of a name, but I don't know the setting, so I don't know if I come up with a specific ethnicity for a name, it's just not going to fit at all, and I don't want to be too mean. But yeah, I just sort of have this image of this, Fennec Fox with the sort of, the jumpsuit that's all, covered in like oil and whatnot, sort of working in this airplane hangar.
So what's funny is the idea I had for an item is kind of really in opposition to that. However, it belongs in sort of the same time period.
Oh, yeah?
Which is interesting. Yeah, I was thinking a silver hand mirror.
Ooh, okay.
With an emerald inset at the top of it.
I think we're getting very Indiana Jones-ish.
Yeah, it's kind of that time period. So there you go, Kite Phoenix. A Fennec Fox airplane mechanic and a silver ornate hand mirror with an emerald in it, set at the top of the frame.
Yeah. Maybe he's, airplane mechanic by day, fabulous drag queen by night.
Maybe. I was just thinking he finds the hand mirror in a piece of luggage on his plane, and it's dropped by a passenger, and he has to track down the mysterious lady who would never look twice at an airplane mechanic.
But it's really a guy in drag. No. I am not obsessed with guys in drag. I think of the one piece of period sort of science, period fiction thing I've done, which was my Lovecraft Takeoff, which is all about investigating the murder of a drag queen.
Well, I did have that one story that I was supposed to write about the coyote who was supposed to dress up in drag as a Southern Belle.
Oh my god, I remember that.
I never wrote it.
What happened? Yeah, what happened? They just never wrote it?
I just never wrote it.
Was I partly responsible for that?
Yeah, it was you and Cario, I think.
Oh, okay, right. That's...
Anyway, so I think we're
If
actually
if people are wondering where do we get ideas for our stories from, wherever. And this is a perfect example of that.
So the last thing we were going to talk about was the holiday stuff, but we're running real short on time. I'll just say we've both written some holiday stories, and holidays are a great source of conflict, conflict is a great fundamental ingredient of a story. And so, man, when you get families together, people who haven't seen each other in years, and people have all these old arguments and feuds buried under the surface coming to light, that's what the holidays are all about.
Oh yeah. Sounds like my holidays.
Send in some of your holiday questions or stories or experiences, and at some point before Christmas we'll do an episode.
Yeah.
Like that.
Then I'm just thinking of, take unstable relatives, add eggnog, watch fireworks occur.
Again, the email is unsheathedpodcast@gmail.com. We're also unsheathed@FA, although if you send us a note on FA, it more or less gets copied over to the Gmail account, so you might as well just send it there if you can.
Cut out the middleman.
We will be at MFF in various locations in scenic Wheeling, Chicago, this coming weekend.
If you've never been to Wheeling, it's not actually that scenic at all.
Yeah, well.
Unless you like seeing dead trees and wasteland.
And pancake houses. There's like 4 of them there.
Yeah.
But anyway, we will wrap up episode 17, which I think has lived up to my favorite number, Billin.
Yeah, I think we had some good talk this time.
And I'm Kyle Gold.
I'm Cam Hirosaki, looking forward to vacation.
And looking forward to meeting all of y'all in person